Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 8 of Organizational Sherlocks. So this month, we've been focusing on talking about organizational structures. Last podcast, we talked with Terrence Dunn of Transformation Acquisitions regarding leadership and organizational structures. And before that, in episode 6, we discussed organizational structures, the different types, what their purpose is. So Elizabeth, tell me, as a reminder to our listeners, tell me a little bit about why we're so focused on talking about organizational structures today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think organizational structures, they really are that foundation upon which organizations function, right? And so I think, it's a big topic. And while some organizations have very clearly defined organizational structures, for those who work in organizations, you may recognize, kind of an org chart. That's a visual representation of your structure. But I think there are also some organizations that maybe don't define it as clearly, but there still is a structure that exists. And I think that's really why it's so important, is understanding who am I within this greater, what is my role or what are my responsibilities within this greater structure?
Yeah,
and how does that all? Yeah, exactly. Where do I fit or where do you fit, right? And how does that align or not with a mission and vision? And so really, I think, while it's probably not a topic that many of us go and talk about over coffee, it is a topic that is so central to the operational excellence of all of the organizations around.
Yeah, It defines communication channels. It defines where authority figures lie. It aligns, what your job ladder could be as you join a company. Where are you entering as mid-tier? Are you entering as entry level? But what's your job ladder look like? So what's your availability for movement in the company? Where can you grow? And I think it's super important to talk about org structures because of that. Now, I feel like, Elizabeth, we've really talked about, organizational structures on a high level view. What are the different types? And, how does leadership fit into it? But I feel like we really have to get into the nitty gritty. We need to talk about a singular organizational structure, and we need to talk about, how it does in fact create, those authority figures, that communication channel, the tasks of the organization and how they occur, where they occur.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this would be an awesome time to introduce a case study. And I have an idea if you're willing to kind of go down that path with me.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
All right, cool. So I was thinking about, prior to, recording today, I was thinking about all of the different companies and who might know, or what's like a popular company that people know. And I'm assuming that the majority of our listeners, if not all, know who Netflix is. I'm guessing you do too, Morgan?
Yeah. In the spare moments, the 20 minutes a week I have, I might put on a Netflix show or two.
Oh, I've been known to binge watch plenty of shows. I could give a whole list of those, but that's for maybe another podcast. So I thought we could talk about Netflix because they started out in 1997. And if for those who remember Netflix back in that time, it was a subscription-based video rental service. So you would go online and you'd say, I want to, get this movie or this show. I always did Dexter, if you remember the show Dexter from HBO. That was the one that I got in the mail. So they sent me a DVD in the mail. I watched it and then I had to send it back, right? So that's where it all kind of started. And then if we remember the red box, the big red box outside of gas stations.
Still exist. There's still a bunch of red boxes around.
I can't find them as frequently. I looked for one the other day and I couldn't find it, not as much as I could back in the day, but kind of they've had a lot of transitions, right? And really, I will say that a dramatic shift back in 2007 when they made this strategic decision to shift from this kind of mail ordered, video kind of, or
service.
People to receive them via mail service, to more of a streaming service, which is what we are all probably more familiar with today.
Yeah, we've
And
seen
with that-
streaming services take off.
Yeah.
And I mean, to an extent, Netflix is the virtual version of Blockbuster. So Blockbuster was, you actually went into a store, you rented a movie, you rented a DVD, and then we saw Redbox, which is a more convenient version of it, come out. And then now Netflix, 2007, really started these streaming services, and we see a lot these days. I mean, HBO has a streaming service. We have Disney Plus. There's so many more to talk about, but we really think that knowing that a lot of you have a familiarity with Netflix, let's give you a little background and talk about how that organizational structure shifted with this strategic move.
Absolutely. For what it's worth, I just want to say I'm kind of bummed that Blockbuster's out of business because I really enjoyed going there. And it's kind of a bummer that my kids will never experience that. Just wanted to throw that out there.
If you don't know what Blockbuster is, if you're listening, look it up.
Exactly. Yes. So I think it'd be helpful for us to, we've talked about the kind of the history of Netflix at this point, but I think their philosophy is really one that is important to call out. And I say that because it really has a profound impact on how they have decided to build their organizational structure. And so the philosophy that they're kind of their guiding light, their North Star, if you will, is people over process. Right. And really that's about creating this team of very talented people who can work together collaboratively and have a lot of freedom in being able to do that. So tell me a little bit what you think.
Yeah, one of their founding meanings is freedom. It's kind of funny to hear that because they're a very autonomous company, so they're very focused on autonomy of their team members, their employees. Oftentimes, I use the term team members in place of employees for those collaborative, autonomous type of companies for that reason, because you're really not just an employee. And so they have probably one of the most free-flowing type of organizational structures because of that. They give so much autonomy. There's a level of, they want free thinking, they want creative ideas, and they want people to make decisions. They just need to make sure that, there's a solid foundation from which these individuals know they can make their decisions. So everyone really has this freedom, and they do it in a divisional structural way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we can talk about what those divisions are too, right? Because, it's important, right? No organization is necessarily going to have the same divisional structure, right?
Yeah.
So the terminology we're using around these divisions are really related to Netflix. In other organizations, they may be called different things or made up of different kind of groups of people or functions. So that just keep that in mind as we're walking through all of this. But yeah, should we kind of start calling out what some of those divisions are today?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah.
I mean, I challenge our listeners to first think of what those divisions might be. If you go on Netflix, it's told to you right there. It really is what those divisions are, and that is the different types of videos they're streaming. So I know there's documentaries. That's one of their divisions. They also have comedy. They have the different genres of videos and movies and shows. Those are their divisions.
Yeah. They have different people working on kind of different areas based on interest and their talent and kind of their background and all of those pieces. But I think it's really cool. But if it's okay, maybe we kind of take it one step higher level and then break it down if that's
we can definitely take it one step higher, because I know I kind of jumped right into the very nitty-gritty divisional structure, but let's talk a little bit more about the matrix version of the division.
Well, let's start with the one that you're talking about though, because it's the one that I would say has probably the most direct impact on all of us watching the shows, right? And that really is related to their product teams, right? Which for them is the creation of Netflix original shows, or acquiring the rights to be able to show shows that are not Netflix created.
Different content
Disney movies or Hallmark shows or whatever it may be, right? And really then that distribution of that content, which is what we see as people watching Netflix, right? We are their products are what we bring to the table.
Mhm.
So as we look at that, then I think you can break that up further, and the way Netflix does is into that original programming and that other content, which is exactly what you're referring to when you're talking about
Yeah.
the different genres as well. So
Yeah.
will you do more?
Yeah. So just to recap what you were saying there, Elizabeth, is, the structure is based off of 3 different divisions. One of those divisions being product teams, which is then separated into further divisions relating back to what I was saying, the different types of content. So the nonfiction documentaries, the comedy, the mystery, those different ones, thrillers. That's how it's split up with their product teams, not just for what they're creating, but for what they're acquiring to be able to stream. And so that's one of the ways in which they work. But their deeper methodology of freedom and autonomy that plays into allowing these individuals to create what they want or search for what they want as well, right?
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
All right, Morgan. If you had to choose your top 2 genres or top 2 divisions that you watch on Netflix or like to watch the most on Netflix, what would they be? I'll answer it too, but I'm curious.
Honestly, I don't know if I can decide that. I feel like I don't watch a lot of television. I definitely used to when I was younger. But that's a hard question. I would say I really enjoy action movies specifically. Okay. So something with action, something that's realistic. So realistic fiction of some sort. So it's maybe based off of past history, kind of historical fiction in a sense. I really enjoyed those. So it's based off history, but there's obviously drama involved in that. I enjoy those. But then, so the action ones, though, specifically. So when we think of war movies, Avengers, things like that.
Oh, I love Avengers. So good. Yeah. I'm a huge psychological thriller. I find that I like to be surprised.
I can't do those.
I never would have guessed it was that person, those kinds of things. And then I love documentaries. And so there are some pretty good documentaries out there to take a look at, especially now. We've been watching them when we have some time.
Yeah, so listeners, think of your favorite genre. That's one of the divisions at Netflix.
Exactly. Thank you for going through that with me. I just think it's fun to get to know people. And now all of you know a little bit more about us. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what are some of the other divisions? So there's those 3 main divisions at Netflix. What are the other 2?
Yeah. So we'll go next to the functional division. So kind of that main division. Again, as you mentioned before, Morgan, it really is then further broken down into different functions, different areas. So whether that is talent, finance, their legal area, I would imagine they have kind of HR and content, those pieces. And interestingly, within that division, when you kind of look at the org chart and how it all comes together, it's a little bit more hierarchical than it is in the other 2 main divisions.
It has the exact same name as a type of hierarchy, as a type of organizational structure, a functional one. So even though it's one division in Netflix, that division specifically has a functional setup, has a functional org structure. While the overall Netflix org structure is divisional, the one of the divisions has a functional org structure. So you can see different types of org structures within the org structures. While there sometimes a functional org structure has matrix org structures within it. And Netflix specifically goes from divisional to functional in one of its divisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about the functional division, and actually what I've seen in different companies who operate in a similar fashion, is that this functional division is really the group that kind of sets the tone or sets the strategic direction, right? Yeah. This is where we, back in 2007, the functional group was probably saying, oh my gosh, we have to do something different. We need to innovate. We need to create something. Let's try streaming. Let's figure out what that looks like. And then being able to make that decision and then communicate that on down to the product teams and to the other divisions so that they could then use that autonomy, use that freedom to make that a reality. And they have.
They're building the mission. They're building the vision. developing that foundation from which the other divisions work from. And so they're the ones participating in organizational development and continuous improvement. And that's also the division, the functional division is the one that is having those regular touch bases to ensure that, the autonomy that's given is they're making the right decisions through that autonomy, right? So they're the ones that have to do those regular checks in a sense. They have to be the ones doing regular training and development with those other divisions to ensure that, the decisions they're making are the right ones. That's the one downfall in a higher autonomous company is you need to have a really strict, values and methods, and you need to ensure there is buy-in by the team members and the employees.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would totally agree. And it seems like Netflix, from everything I know about them and what kind of how they present themselves and the folks that I know that work there, that they do actually live the people over process, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That philosophy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And to see that's honestly what's allowing Netflix to reach such high success. It really is. I mean, having that people over process perspective, well, yes, the process has to be there, but if the people are living that process, then you really don't have to worry about the process as much. You're just, helping those people move forward in their careers. So those people get to develop, the company then gets to develop equals greater success overall. So org structures, well, people think, oh, it's org structures, it'll develop as it develops. No, if you can plan for that organizational structure
Absolutely.
like Netflix did, you're planning for your success.
Oh, 100%. I would completely agree. All right. So we have talked about 2 of their 3 main divisions. We have talked about product teams. So what we see every day when we turn on Netflix, or how often, I guess
What you think of when you're thinking
we think
genres.
Netflix. We've talked about functional, so kind of the folks that set the direction, make those decisions, and then let people create.
The higher level business processes there.
Exactly. Why don't you tell us about the third one, Morgan? What is the third kind of main division for Netflix?
Yeah, so the third one, the third division is also a divisional setup within org structures, and that is kind of what Elizabeth had talked about towards the end of episode 6 of a couple weeks ago, and that was geographical structures. So geographical structures are a type of divisional structure, and that's because Netflix is an international company. So they need to make sure that what they're putting out will be watched by the areas they're in. So they need to have a local perspective, a different diversity type of perspective to what they're streaming.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like you said, they breaking it down into the local and then international operations. And then I think, we haven't done, on our podcast, we haven't gotten into marketing a ton yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a huge component or a kind of a responsibility of the geographical group, right? Is how can we tailor our marketing strategies so that we can both retain customers and have them be really satisfied. But also, how can we encourage new customers to join the Netflix family, if you will? And part of that is really understanding what's happening in these different regions. You and I, Morgan, are in different regions. I would be curious. I know I probably can't. It's probably some kind of IP or something like that. But it'd be interesting to see what they have, what Netflix looks at from a Midwest kind of, what are people in the Midwest watching versus what are people on the East Coast watching?
Yeah, that definitely would be interesting. I know when I've traveled before and, I decided I was going to watch Netflix and I logged in from the streaming service in, I think I was traveling to Cancun for work, funny enough. And I was like, I need a quiet night. And I sit in to watch a show on Netflix. Going to my Netflix, it's different. It was different. Yeah. It was based off of the local streaming service. And so there's a lot of Spanish shows, which is cool because I do have limited working Spanish proficiency. And so I honestly was like, I'm going to watch them. This will be fun. But there's also certain Spanish shows that were available here in America. And that's because we have a large Spanish speaking group of individuals here. And so it's really cool to see. I don't know if there's difference between the Midwest versus the Northeast for us, because, I feel America might be treated, or the United States might be treated as kind of one region. But I do know, language wise, there are certain shows that, they have to get translated from one language to the next. So a movie might be, reminiscent of multiple cultures. And so it's going to be streamed in multiple geographical locations across the world. But the show is going to have a different language put on top of it. And that's probably part of the product team and the geographical team together, both divisions working together to ensure that, there's English subtitles or there's English speaking over maybe Dutch speaking or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love those shows. I watch a lot of them, just so you know.
I'll be honest, the ones that have English over the regular language, like if they're speaking English, I can tell that the lips are moving in a different way. And so it's not the same wording. And honestly, it drives me crazy.
See, I'm a huge caption person, so I have captions on no matter what language anything is in. So that helps me because I can kind of follow on the captions below. But I don't know. I don't think I'm alone in that, but I may be. Who knows?
No, there's definitely a lot of people. Honestly, a lot of neurodivergent people like captions because it prevents you from getting so distracted in a sense from the show, so you can pay attention when especially if it's a thriller like you like.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. When people are talking so fast, I'm trying to figure it all out. It's helpful. It kind of grounds me a little bit. So I appreciate that and want Netflix to keep offering it on all of their shows.
Yeah. Not to get off topic there, but Netflix is something that we all probably watch. I know very few people that don't have Netflix. But really these 3 divisions in Netflix, they all have the same method to them. They all have the same underlying values, while the tasks that they're doing, the actions and the authority, it's a little different between each division. That needs to be different because of their different purposes. But in the end, they all have the underlying value. They all have the same underlying mission and vision. And that's what's so important for Netflix to maintain in order to maintain this people over process autonomous culture.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about mission statements before, and their mission statement is we want to entertain the world, right? Yeah. And so when you think about organizational structures, and in my mind, I think about all kind of these 3 areas and then how they're all broken down. And ultimately, everything they do is kind of in the essence of achieving that mission. Right. So I mean, there's definitely these common threads between all of the folks that work at Netflix within each division, all of that. And then I'm sure that, culture is probably another part of that. There's maybe a larger Netflix culture and even these smaller cultures within each division, right? Because of how closely they work together. When do they reach across the table to another division? I think those are kind of some of those pieces that we don't always think about, but we should, particularly when we're thinking about changing an organizational structure. It's not just who reports to who, but how is the working relationship going to change between different groups when we completely, throw things out the door. And I think that's where that strategy really comes in, is it's not just looking at what's on the surface, but also digging deeper to understand it better.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of companies, unfortunately, don't give the time they need to that, especially small companies. I mean, I've said it a billion times before, but I work with a lot of small companies, and it's so important to look at the structures and to plan for them, because you can plan a company out for years. People tend to say you should look 3 to 5 years down the road. At minimum, I recommend people have an understand what 2 years is going to look like. In fact, I was editing an organizational structure the other day for recommendations in the manufacturing unit. And I said, well, this is what you really want to do. Right now you're at this relatively 30-person mark, but we feel we're behind the mark on getting a couple extra staff members. We just need some extra sets of hands, general production. So this is what we need right now. Let's get these filled. We're working with a temp agency to do it. It's perfect. That temp agency is, temp or recruitment. So that's a lot of needs. And then but we have another organizational structure planned from there. And that 30-person company looks like it's going to be 48 at some point in time. And and there's already a plan for who do we need to hire when. It's based off of production needs, the amount of product coming through, and the amount of sales we have to do to support that. There's a huge plan behind it, but the organizational structure in the end really helps you build your business plan for the coming years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of brought up this idea of resourcing, right? And how many resources do you need? And it's not just I mean, it's not always easy, I'll be honest, especially in manufacturing. I work with a lot of manufacturing companies. You don't know necessarily what the next year is going to bring, right?
Yeah.
I mean, back in 2019, I don't think any of us had any idea that 2020 was going to happen and the pandemic was going to happen. And so we couldn't prepare for that as well as we might like to, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's really where bringing in the folks in the company that can help with those projections, right?
Yeah.
Help with the projection or so both the projection and what the goal would be, and then bringing in those other folks from the different divisions to, like you said, how can we have sales? How many sales do we need to support this? What kind of resources would we need should this happen, right? And then building a plan to get there, I think is a really big part of it. And again, it's all based on organizational structure and who ultimately puts that final stamp of approval on the plan, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's not just going to be one individual giving that stamp of approval. It's multiple people. There's going to be multiple stakeholders involved in that decision making. And for a smaller company, there's going to be a lot of external resources. And it's important to build that into the organizational structure, at least in communicating it, so they know they have these resources. And that kind of acts as a matrix structure in the end, because you might have a functional structure as a company, but then you go over and you have matrices with these two different companies that help in, maybe with marketing and hiring, for example. Larger companies like Netflix, meanwhile, it's mostly all within Netflix. I wouldn't necessarily see Netflix going externally to get marketing help because they're such a large company at this point in time. And so that's why org structures are so important to look at. It's where do we need help, and do we expense a person to come on our team, or do we expense external resources as well? So it does help you plan for finding the right vendors to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's my job is as a consultant, right? So working with small companies or really large companies, I've worked with both. And you're right. I mean, I'm not a part of the team. I'm not a W-2 employee of that organization that I'm working with. However, because you're so kind of immersed in everything, you understand their culture and their strategy and all of those things, you kind of do become part of the team, you
might be an external consultant, but really you're kind of internal at that point. And that's one thing consultants need to make sure is they have to understand that above all, foundation level value and needs of the company. Because if they don't understand that, how are they going to support them and give them the right resources, or help create the right strategy for them?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I like to think about it kind of in the systems theory, and we won't have to jump into systems theory necessarily, but there's so many factors at play, and at any given time, and the complexity is there, right? I mean, sometimes it's easy even for me at times to kind of get a little bit narrow and say, well, this is the problem. Okay. But then I have to challenge myself to say, but what is impacting this problem, right? What is the organizational culture? What is the market? What is the region doing? What is our world doing? Economics, all of those pieces, because those pieces are central to understanding how we can best help this organization with whatever issue it is that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying. That's why I'm so focused on organizational structures, because in small companies, a lot of times you can dive down into issues, whether that be, toxic cultures, employee motivation, burnout, things like that. Oftentimes, if you look at a small company, it dwindles down to org structures. It really does. And Netflix shows an amazing example of how you can change the way in which you work or an org structure, and with your values, use your values to build that org structure, and you're going to have this higher success. Netflix really is an amazing example of creating that pivot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd encourage people to kind of check it out, research it a little bit. There's many other case studies out there. I know that Morgan and I had looked at ones for like IBM and a couple other places, but take a look. A lot of places will talk about it, or there'll be articles or research studies. And actually, we're going to include in the description of this podcast episode a link to a free article that you can take a look at and try to understand a couple of different companies and where their org structures or how they're set up, and kind of how they got there. So make sure you check out the description so you can find that link.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to share it as well in a separate post. But Yeah, we were looking for case studies to help you guys learn about really the intricacies of at least one organizational structure, just like we looked at, the intricacy of the mission and vision for Starbucks, for example, way back when. And so we're going to share these. I have a couple other, case studies that I've found for free articles. I'm going to share those with you guys as well. And Elizabeth, if you don't mind, Elizabeth did a lot of work on this Netflix case study, so thank you. Maybe we can put out what your work looked like as well. We can just share an article on that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah, we'll definitely put all those links in there. And we'd love to hear kind of what your experience is with organizational structures. And so, find us. We're on LinkedIn. We're constantly posting questions on there for people to answer. And we'd love to engage in conversation and or reach out because as you can probably tell, Morgan and I are very passionate and we love talking about these things. So we would love to talk about them with you.
Yeah, let us know what you want to learn. I know we've had a lot of individuals asking about leadership, and so that's going to be a topic we're getting into, and we're going to bring a couple of guest speakers on for that. And get ready for a hopeful bonus episode in the coming months.
Absolutely, I'm excited. I can't wait. So with that, Morgan, should we wrap up for today's episode?
Yeah, I think we're all set. Guys, dig into Netflix. Learn a little bit more on your own. We've given you a higher level view of it. But in the meantime, watch out for our posts, and we'll talk with you guys later.
See you next time.
Bye.
This concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every other Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.